All right, turning now to the war in Syria following conclusive evidence that proves that the ruling Assad regime has used chemical weapons. President Obama announced the U.S. will send arms to some factions of the Syrian rebel forces. But the president received some pushback from members of Congress that they may not authorize spending. To explain the dilemma, our guest today is Steve Bucci of the Heritage Foundation. He is director of the Allison Center for Foreign Policy Studies. Thank you so much, Steve, for being here with us. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
You know, the president now has confirmed that Syria the Assad regime has crossed the red line with the use of chemical weapons, and says now he will provide arms. I guess my question to you is, what do you think should be the nature of this support? What kind of arms, and how do you decide who to give these arms to, in view of the fact that the rebel forces are not necessarily unified?
Well, you've hit it on the head. The first question is, who do you give this stuff to, regardless of what it is you give them? And right now there's a wide array of factions within the resistance, some of them very radical, very counter to our interest, others in the middle, and some at the end that might be a little more positive and neutral, but they're not the ones that are really the strong forces right now.
You know, our former Congressman Ron Paul said this, that the build-up to the likely strike on Syria, or at least the provision of arms, reminds him of the days leading up to the invasion of the Iraq War. Does that ring true to you at all?
Yes, it does. We had, at that time, we were trying to figure out which expatriate groups to trust, which ones were not being truthful with us. And to be honest with you, we didn't do that good a job of ascertaining that. We have the same problem here. Some folks who are saying, oh, yeah, we're not radical, we're not connected with al-Qaeda, but how do we determine that for real before we give them heavy arms that could end up being turned on us as soon as the fighting in Syria is over?
And in fact, yeah, we're sort of in a darned if we do, darned if we don't situation. You know, there were many that criticized Obama for taking so long to make this decision. Now we have allies in that region that are unhappy that we have made this decision.
It's a very difficult task to decide who to give arms to, what kind of arms, how heavy will those arms be. And you're right, we've got allies at both ends of the spectrum who are looking to us and trying to get us to go one way or another. In this one, the president has my sympathy. It's a tough choice to make, but he's the leader of the free world, and people are looking to him for leadership.
The president is also saying he's not trying to take sides in a religious war between the Shiites and the Sunni. But don't we, by default, do that by getting more involved?
Yeah, right now, because the Assad regime is an Alawite group, very connected with Iran, with Hezbollah, who are all Shias. And the Sunni majority in Syria is who makes up the main part of the resistance. So if we help the resistance, we're essentially helping some of the Sunni factions. So yeah, we're going to end up on one side of that schism or another.
And it seems to me, at least the president has made this a point, although I haven't heard him say it recently since making the commitment to provide arms, that one of the things that had to happen was that Bashar al-Assad had to step down and had to be removed from leadership. Because the Assad regime momentum in this conflict has been building recently, do you think that that's now unlikely and not realistic?
Well, it's a tough way to go. He's not tottering any longer. He's solidified his position. The Iranians have given him a great deal of assistance. The Russians are helping him. Hezbollah has sent troops there. There's Iranian special forces. He's in a pretty solid position. So now going against him, it's not something that's going to be settled in the next couple of days. This is going to go on for a while.
Yes, it indeed will, unfortunately. Stephen Bucci from the Heritage Foundation, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Let's turn now to Politico reporter Reid Epstein, who's been covering and following this story on the Hill. Reid, as always, it's good to see you. Thanks for taking a little bit of time with me. I guess I'm almost amused by the politics, although this is a very serious situation, nothing to be laughed at. For such a long time, the GOP has been saying the president has been soft on this. He needs to do something. He needs to do something. Certainly, John McCain has been out front on that. Now that he said, okay, red line has been crossed, we're going to provide arms, many of the GOP and the Congress say, wait a minute, we don't know if we're going to fund this. Is it wise to play politics with this right now?
Well, it's a very different Republican Party than what we saw when President Bush was in office. It's a much more isolationist, much more reflexively against whatever President Obama is for. And in this case, President Obama has made it a little bit easier on them by sort of not making a firm decision early on Syria. He's waited and waited, and then, as we saw last week, said that he's going to send some small arms to Syria, which, like your previous guest said, probably isn't going to be enough to satisfy folks on either side, either folks who want folks like Senator McCain, who want sort of a full-throated American support for the rebels, or people who are more isolationist and want to keep the United States out of the conflict at all costs.
Yeah, so many have criticized that it's too little too late.
Yeah, and that's a fair criticism to make of the White House at the moment. We'll have to see how this plays out. It's been going on a long time. It certainly will go on a long time into the future. And we don't yet know what specific type of role the United States is going to play, how significant arms they're going to deliver, and whether there's going to be more American military support in the future. At the moment, the White House has said there's not, but they haven't ruled out sending U.S. troops to, if not a boots-on-the-ground type of situation, but some sort of military support like what happened in Libya.
You know what, it's so interesting. We have taken 2 years to wade into it. The Civil War has been going on for 2 years now. The president was very cautious before declaring that the so-called red line was crossed, now pledging armed support. I wonder what position this puts the U.S. in that region. That, is our stance weakened in other issues as well as the Syrian conflict?
Well, it certainly doesn't make things easier. President Obama, as you remember, his rise to political power and his election in 2008 was largely predicated on his opposition to the war in Iraq. And now here he is faced with a situation where he has to choose between stopping Assad from continuing to kill and, as we learned, use chemical weapons on many of his own people, and having the United States get involved in another Middle East conflict widely opposed by people at home, who the polls here show that folks are, by large numbers, would oppose U.S. military intervention in Syria, a place that most Americans don't have much understanding about what's going on. And the White House hasn't done a whole lot to explain to the American public why it's in the American national interest to be involved there.
And going back to this whole congressional opposition to funding, or at least their reluctance or hesitance to fund, very, very briefly, Mike Rogers went on Face the Nation this Sunday and said, well, we need to know a lot more. A lot of questions need to be answered. Do you suspect this is just bluster for the sake of political bluster, and ultimately they're going to have to be obligated to do something to support getting involved to end this conflict?
Well, the White House has a pretty wide latitude as far as what the president can spend money on overseas. In the past, Congress has not blocked military spending. Even during the Iraq War, when it was extremely unpopular, military spending was always approved by the Congress. But the budget, the government is operating under now, runs through the end of September, and so this is a decision that will have to be made in the next few months between the Congress and the White House to pass the broader budget, and military spending is, of course, a part of that.
Yes, indeed. Reid Epstein, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.
And this is Arise America.